I'm trying to build the coolest Warhammer table ever built, a kill team table set on a derelict spaceship. In part 1 of this series, I built the exterior of the ship and a backdrop of outer space meeting with the seething tides of the warp. In part 2, I built the interior of the ship using a mountain of plastic Games Workshop kits from the new kill team boxes that Games Workshop has released over the past year. And in this video, I'm finishing the project, painting the piece and putting it all together so it's ready to play on. I'm going to be showing you a whole ton of different methods and techniques, from airbrush to hand painting, to get a variety of cool results that you can apply to your own projects. Let's get right into it, picking up where we left off in the last video. So the table's totally built, and in the previous video I came up with some names to identify the individual rooms so I can refer to them easily. Just to recap, we have the hangar, a room that opens into the void of space and represents a deployment point for the forces just boarding the Hulk. The gallery, a long double-high room with a bank of high windows looking into space. The maintenance corridor, an access shaft beneath the normal hallways that acts as a second and secret passage between areas. The bottomless shaft, a vertical room with a precipitous drop to levels below. This room can be rigged with mirrors to provide an even more intense illusion, suggesting a shaft that goes even deeper. In the previous video, some of the more mundane rooms and corridors didn't get names, so let's name those now. Some of the names might not make sense yet, but they will in a moment, so let's start with this one here, the one just outside the hangar. This one will be called the blackout corridor. Just beyond that, we're going to call this the Red Rum Hall, and this big room between the gallery and the shaft we'll call the generator room. This hall on the outside over here, we'll call this the Hulk Zone. Okay, everything's named, let's get right into this. First things first, we have to prime everything. I painted pretty much everything with a rattle can of 2-in-1 Rust-Oleum paint and primer. This stuff is cheap and it'll make a nice dark gray finish that paint will stick well to. Because of the way I built this thing, the rooms are often spread across several different pieces. It's kind of hard to keep track, but varying the color schemes is also going to help us make it easy to assemble later on. So let's start with the first room, the hangar. For the color scheme of the hangar, I wanted to go with something simple and classic, so I turned to an old source of inspiration, the original Necromunda, released in 1995. That box set came with some iconic cardboard terrain, and I've always liked the color scheme. It's a simple robin's egg blue with yellow and black hazard stripes, so let's give it a go. I start by spraying the walls of the hangar with some glossy pale blue spray paint. Spray paint is a great way to get an even and durable coating on a large area without breaking the bank, so I used it a fair bit in this project. I picked out some really fast details using black and silver. I'm being as neat as I can here while still going really fast. This table has enough detail on it that to paint it to the best of my abilities would take longer than painting a whole army, so I'm going fast here, trying to be neat, but it's not going to be perfect everywhere. The idea here is I'm going to weather everything so heavily that it won't really be noticeable anyways. And if there's some metal on the blue part, it's a chip in the paint. If there's some blue where the metal should be, that's just the landlord's special, a bit of sloppy painting. It's all about the suspension of disbelief, guys. For these tanks here, I thought a nice dark blue would be good. I don't want to introduce new hues, but I do want some contrast, so a nice dark blue is perfect. 2 coats will do it. Time to do some hazard stripes. I start with a bit of masking tape, and then paint everything with a nice warm yellow from the Army Painter range. A few more strips of thinner masking tape, and I come back in with the black. I could have used an airbrush here, but a brush is just faster. And it's going to be weathered, so, who really cares? The masking tape is going to protect the surrounding areas of paint so that only what we want exposed is going to be exposed. Which reminds me of today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will help you protect your personal data so that only what you want exposed will be exposed. I used Aura to do a search for what personal information of mine is on the internet, and I couldn't believe how many data brokers had my information. Look at them all. These data brokers are the people who sell your information to robocallers, spammers, and other people who want to learn more about you, like where you live. Aura can identify the data brokers who are selling your private information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Data brokers are legally obligated to remove your information if they receive one of these requests, but they make it really hard to do, so let Aura handle that for you. So if you go to aura.com/ericshobby, you can try Aura for 2 free weeks using my link. Aura has a ton more features to protect your family though, things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. So let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online so you can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. You can either let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information, or you can go to aura.com/ericshobby to start your 2-week free trial. I'll put the link to Aura and the 2-week free trial in the description box below. Thanks Aura for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the project. So now that we've painted in this hazard stripes with the masking tape, it's time for a peel. Pretty clean. I like it. 2 for 2. Let's go. Next I'm going to take some dark gray paint, and with a bit of sponge I'm going to dab at the edges, breaking up those clean lines and leaving some nicks and dings showing dull metal below. This will really bring out the definition of the panels in a quick, easy way. On the catwalk above, I weather it extra hard in the center where I imagine the most footfalls would be. This is a simple and easy way to get some realism. Just try to think like a little guy. With my dings dinged, I spray some gloss varnish through an airbrush, which will prepare the piece for the next step. A heavy oil wash of black and brown oil paints and mineral spirits. Now mineral spirits are no joke, guys. They can really mess up your health, so make sure to use adequate ventilation and breathing protection. Once everything is dry, and you can speed this up with a hairdryer, but again be mindful of toxic fumes, I put a bit of clean mineral spirits on a makeup sponge and scrub away some dirt and grime from the larger panels, bringing back a little bit of the blue. It's still totally filthy, but it's a little bit more interesting to look at. And that's it. That's the scheme for the hangar. Considering how much detail is crusted on this thing, that was fairly quick. I love the look of this room, and I'm really excited to paint the rest of this thing. The next section we're going to paint is the aptly named Hulkway. Why the Hulkway? Well, because I'm going to paint it green, starting with some spray paint as before. But despite what you think, it's not named after the Incredible Hulk, but rather to pay homage to this classic piece of Space Hulk art, which features a green hallway. I thought it was a cool look and I wanted to include some classical elements in this piece, and so I gave it a shot. Once the green was sprayed on with a spray can, I highlighted it with some lighter canopy green through the airbrush, giving it a nice gradient and some vibrance. From there, the steps are very similar to the previous section. I pick out some details, metal, skulls, wires, some screens, and then do a nice brown and black oil wash. It's very simple, but it's another cool color scheme, I think. It looks particularly good with red blood angels and purple tyranids together. Isn't that fun? So next up, let's go into the L-shaped corridor beyond, the room that I've called the blackout zone. The concept for the blackout zone is an area where the power is out, so the systems are running on emergency power. So I'm starting with pure black as a base color to represent the inky darkness of the powered down corridor. I imagine that the light fixtures featured on many of the wall sections are the emergency lighting. These are going to be the basis of my light on these pieces, but it also gives me an excuse for not having painted them in a glowing way on any of the other sections. Those ones have overhead lights that you wouldn't see because the roof is lifted away to give us that top-down cross-section view. So I think I need to address the fact that I've had this project in progress for almost a year now, and I apologize for that. And one of the benefits of delaying the project was that I got to see how other artists approached painting this Gallowdark terrain. And one of the best ones I saw was by El Miniaturista, who's a master of object source lighting effects in his paint jobs. So here's my simplified take on something inspired by them. I start by painting the walls just a flat black, then dry brush the whole thing with dark gray, just to define some of the details. Once that's done, I choose some areas that I want to be glowing with light, and I dry brush some bright spots of pure white into these places. Some of the screens, the lights, and around the servo skull's eye lenses in particular. With that done, I use some neon airbrush paints to tint that white glow, making a bright and saturated glow effect. I use some more of the neon paint to reinforce the color around the lenses, and then add some pure white to the center of the light sources. And that's it. It's a pretty decent darkened glow effect that suggests a corridor that's running on emergency power. Very atmospheric, very creepy, and adds some really cool variation to the hallways here. Moving on from the blackout zone, we come to the Red Rum Hall. I wanted this hallway to look like something horrible had happened in it, something straight out of a horror movie. So I started by painting the whole thing with a creamy white spray paint. I picked out some of the details with quite a dark metallic color this time because the darker metal contrasts better with the light walls. I picked out a few of the details with light blue, again for contrast. Let's talk for a moment about efficiency. Layout wise, this hallway is towards the center of the table. This means that it's very awkward to get a good view of these walls. And for that reason, it would be crazy for me to put the same level of effort into making these look good up close. So after picking out the major details, I got right into sponge chipping with dark gray, added some varnish, then a nice oil wash. So So here comes the part that will set this room apart from the rest. I used Slaughter Red, a nice gory speed paint from Army Painter, to splatter some sprays of this deep red onto the walls. Ugh. Ah. Ah. Looks like something really gnarly happened here, like a no-holds-barred raspberry jam fight or something. Nice. So as a finishing touch, I'm also painting the tops of the walls with a flat black paint. Now, even though the column pieces do have some detail up here, I think that the black is important to remind our brains that this is in fact a cross section. If the top of the wall is painted, it gives more of a hedge maze vibe than the impression that you're seeing a room that should have a ceiling. Underneath the red rum hall and the blackout zone is the maintenance corridor, which I painted basically half in the blackout scheme and half like the hangar. I kept it pretty dark and simple down there. I do feel like it's kind of missing something though. What do you guys think? Should I add some wires along the floor or something? Some grime, some creatures? Or is it good as is? Next up is the generator room. This one I wanted to paint by hand to show you that you can get some decent results without the airbrush or rattle cans. I started by painting a nice turquoise color onto the walls, then mixed some white into my turquoise color and dry brushed the wall sections heavily. I did this again with more white mixed in, then picked out some details, chipped, and washed it with oil same as before. If you recall, this room had a moving wall section that could help give it a modular and varied layout. So for this wall, I tried an alternative to using oil paints that might be easier for some of you guys if you don't want to mess around with the toxic fumes of mineral spirits. I start with some Army Painter speed paint. I'm using the color Hardened Leather, which is a nice brown tone, and I then mix in a very little bit of black paint and a bunch of my dirty paint water and just wash it on there. I apply more water from my water cup and scrub the brush around until I'm happy with the level of grime. The nice thing about this is because it's an acrylic paint, it dries faster and it won't rub off on your hands without a varnish. Using some off-whites, I painted one of the big generator pieces of scatter terrain in much the same way. As you can see, you can get some really fast and solid results with this method, and I think it's my new go-to for painting bits of scatter like this in a nice weathered grimdark style. Next up, the gallery. The gallery is probably my favorite room, but I have absolutely nothing new or exciting to say about it in terms of the paint job. After a bit of consideration, I ended up painting it exactly the same way as I painted the hangar, the first room that we painted. These mesh floors are actually kind of a pain to paint, and I ended up making a ton of greasy looking splotches and stains, which I think gives the room a more utilitarian and mechanical feel, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I just love the vibe of this room. The arches, the grand high ceiling. It just really adds something special to the whole table, which makes it my favorite room. Our final room is the shaft, which, as I mentioned before, features an optical illusion to make it look like it descends right into the table itself. To paint this one, I knew that I had to be careful and not make any directional shadows that would disrupt the illusion when the mirror is in place. But I wanted to have some extra definition to all the intricate machine bits that were visible. So I started with sort of a zenithal spray of creamy white from directly horizontal, which means the angle will stay consistent even in mirror image. After that, it was more of the same, picking out details, sponge chipping. What I love about this chipping effect is that even some of the planar surfaces get a very detailed appearance from the chips. Again, I focused the weathering on areas I thought would get the most footfalls and wear and tear. Then once again, I applied a filthy oil wash of brown and black, and this derelict shaft is ready to go. Man, I'd forgotten how cool this thing is. It's very cool. Okay, time to put it all together, which means getting out the warp backdrop. Nice. This is so sick. Finally, after a long road, I'm ready to play some games on this bad boy. Who would you guys like to see battle first on this? Blood Angels? Night Lords? Imperial Guard? Kroot? Genestealer Cult? Tyranids? I'm going to be putting up a poll to my Patreon patrons to make it happen. Also, if this video gets 5,000 likes, I'll make a how to play kill team video for you guys. Let me know if this is something you want to see. Once again, I want to give a huge thanks to my channel supporters and Patreon patrons. I really appreciate your continued support. With this large project off the table, there's one project that's been looming large on my to-do list. Very large. Titanically large. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.